Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Q&As. It's Thursday morning, so I think there was enough time to get questions in. I checked yesterday and there weren't too many, so I think we're all set up and ready to go. So let's jump right in. First up, over on Patreon, Tom M has a question about arcade boards, Superguns, and the Tink 4K. They have a few Midway Wolf unit boards like MK2, UMK3, NBA Jam Tournament Edition, etc., and a couple of Superguns. These boards have a weird video refresh rate, which they're sure the Tink 4K can handle. But their question is there any risk to the Tink 4K if they connect the Superguns to it? Is there anything they need to be cautious of? They've heard of mismatched voltage, etc. So, yeah, you always want to worry with Superguns. In a very quick history, Superguns are devices that allow you to plug arcade boards into TV equipment, not directly into arcade machines. And when they were first released, they were really for arcade enthusiasts and experts. And then at some point, it started to kind of blend into more mainstream retro gaming. And that's when a lot of problems occurred because people who weren't arcade experts just started plugging them into SCART equipment because they think, okay, RGB SCART, RGB, it's the same thing, right? And that's where a lot of the stuff started happening. Audio voltage was huge because you could send up to 12 volts down the audio line, and any SCART equipment is really expecting like 2.5 volts max. So you would absolutely destroy SCART equipment for things without audio protection. But a lot of these Superguns were going into just speakers and stuff. So that was never really an issue originally. Also, sync voltage is something you always want to be careful of. Sometimes sync voltage is the higher TTL level, which going out of a D-sub connector to a lot of pro equipment is the right way to do it, but not for SCART equipment. So from an audio point of view, the only way to know for sure is to buy a scope and test. That cheap scope video I did, it's like a $35 scope, and you're not going to use that to measure, to build a device and make sure you get it perfect, but you absolutely could use those to make sure that your audio voltage and your RGBS voltage isn't too high. So if you're really concerned, you could use that. You could also just look up the specs of each of them and look for other people who have reviewed them. You're going to want to look for people who put them on a scope, people that just plugged it in and said it worked. That's nice and all, but it's not really helpful. So I would just be very careful. On the Tink side of things, the SCART input is a SCART input. So it's going to act like every other SCART input on the planet, and you will blow it out if you send 12 volts down the audio line. Which is, it's not always that dramatic, but my Simpsons board was definitely that high. That was crazy high voltage. Not all are that that high, but just saying. As far as the VGA input on back, you could plug RGBS into it, and it would handle the higher TTL level sync. But if you have a Supergun that has a dial on it for voltage, and you have that dial cranked all the way up, you could be sending too high voltage down the RGB lines as well. So this really is something that you either want to have a Supergun that's been checked. I think the latest version of the Haas, I think the latest version of the minigun, the latest version of the Behar Brothers Superguns had protection. They had other issues like input latency and stuff like that. But you could look for reviews of Superguns that have been put on a scope and make sure that you have the right matching revision, or you could buy that scope, watch that video, and just kind of learn how to use it. Which, on the one hand, it sucks. I'm telling you to learn a skill that you only need to make sure that your equipment is safe. That's annoying, and most people don't have time for that. But on the other side, if you have a bunch of arcade boards and you want to start using them through the Tink, spending a day learning how to use a cheap scope that is now a really handy tool might be something that's worth it to you. So I'll leave a link to that, but I'm always really hesitant to say yes, it's safe, or no, it's not, unless I've personally tested, just for all the reasons I just spit out. Next up is a couple questions from Adam Brady. First, just following up on the discussion from last week about downscaling. The focus at the moment would just be TV stuff. So they could build a Kodi box, but they'd rather just use their Google TV, but they would have to go from HDMI to RGB SCART. So that's kind of an interesting one. I think if I were you, I would try to look for HDMI downscalers and then go from there. One of the things that might work perfect is the OSSC Pro, which again, it's not a cheap piece of equipment, but it's it could do so many different things. It will have a dedicated VGA board output that you could build yourself now if you want, or you could just wait for Marcus to start selling them. And while you would have to have some kind of HDCP stripper, you could just use an HDMI splitter or something like that for it. But that would actually take whatever up to 1080p and scale it down to 240p or 480i. And if you're using either the HDMI or VGA output, you would either have to then get a cheap HDMI to VGA converter, those are on my Amazon shop. Those are pretty cheap. Or you could use the VGA module, and then you would just need an HD15 to SCART to get the voltage down to the proper sync voltage, and to combine the syncs together. So that's probably going to be your best solution. Not your cheapest, but I mean, you'd be all in for everything that you would need under $400, I think. And you would have a device that does a lot of different things. So Marco Retro actually just posted a video on it, and I just did the write-up on it. So I would strongly suggest watching that video and seeing it, but I think that might be everything that you would need. And the very short version is the OSSC Pro in scalar mode has a bit of lag, but could do anything you want. However, in line multiplier mode, it could do it with zero latency, so you could still use it for even the most hardcore fighting games as long as your source was 480p. So it's a device that allows you to do so many different things. So I would check that out and see. I mean, there's always the Tink 5X as well, but then you would need to buy you'd need to buy 2 converters. It's still an amazing device, but I would just really suggest Marco's video, and I think that might kind of put things into perspective for you. Next question. They think it's a fair assumption that I have a lot of retro consoles. I had, yeah. So they won't ask which ones unless I'd like to list them. No, no offense. It's boring to just sit here and list everything I have. So no disrespect to you, but instead they're curious which consoles I'm missing and would like to help complete my collection. Which ones are my favorite? They have a guess that it's the Genesis Tower of Power, but it might be the SNES, or they're wrong entirely. So I had a lot of consoles. I had to sell almost all of them for a bunch of reasons. So I'm down to what I need to do RetroRGB or what I want for myself. My favorite consoles have always been the Genesis and the SNES. I'm assuming that's nostalgia. As far as like looking at a console goes, I'm pretty sure that's nostalgia. I had an NES as a kid, and then I went out and bought those with my own money, the SNES and Genesis, and mowed lawns at like 10 years old. I mean, it'd probably be illegal today to do what I did all those years ago, but whatever. And, I earned those and I loved them. And it's funny because there's something about the look of the original Tower of Power that was so cool, or even just the Genesis and Sega CD. It looked so futuristic at the time. I had my own CD player, which was a big deal for a kid in the early 90s, especially like a lower middle class kid. So back then, I probably would have said that's my favorite, the Genesis and the Sega CD, the way it looks, the way it sat on my shelf. But to be honest, these days, my favorite to look at sitting on the shelf that I'll always have for the rest of my life, an original fat SNES and an original Model 1 Genesis that says high-definition graphics on it. I will have those on display somewhere in my house till the day I die. I don't even care if it's weird. I just love it. I think it's very cool. And I think those are my favorite to play, but also I just think are the coolest looking from my perspective. Now, I imagine if I was born 10 years later, I might say that the N64 and the Saturn was my favorite, or I don't know. But, that's just a nice, honest answer to your question. However, what am I missing? The stuff that I'm missing isn't actually consoles. It's things that I've wanted for test reasons that I've never found. The number one thing would be an SNES Game Genie that also has the tabs so that you could pass Super FX games through them. Now, there is no use for something like this, especially with the FX Pack Pro. This isn't some rare piece of hardware that will unlock something that you can't do elsewhere. I've just never seen one, and I've only seen one blurry picture of it on the internet 13 years ago, right before I started RetroRGB. So that's the one thing I really want, just so I could, take it apart, take some pictures, clean it, plug it in, see how it works, see how it still works badly on an SNES Junior, and then put it on my shelf and never use it again. That, and I might be remembering this wrong, but I could swear there used to be all black Wii motion sensor bars. So not the ones that are USB, but the ones that plug into the back of actual Wiis, but the sensor bar itself isn't gray and black in the front, it's all black. And I can't find them anymore. So I'm either remembering that wrong, or I'm remembering the USB version, or I'm remembering the Wii U version that plugs into the Wii U. So I don't know. But if anybody could help me with those, that would be very cool because they're not expensive. They're not important for anything other. Well, the Game Genie is probably important for archiving. The Wii sensor for me is just because I have a dark colored 4x3 monitor I want to stick it on that I don't think the light gray would look as good as an all black. So that's just my OCD. But yeah, I've been able to see all the consoles and see and test all the consoles I wanted, I think. But those two items are the ones that, and the Game Genie is way more important, by the way. But those are the two items that I'm certainly curious about. So yeah, fun question. Hopefully it was a decent answer. Next up, Jason D said someone was asking for an HDMI 4K matrix switch a couple weeks ago for the RetroTink 4K. They have one that's been working for them that is PS3 compatible and supports Mr. Direct Video. So I interpret that to mean that Mr. Direct Video works into this switch, then into the RetroTink 4K's HDMI input. And it's funny because the switch that you linked to was one of the exact ones that I reviewed in the HDMI shootout video. It's no longer available on Amazon for some reason, but that didn't work on the Tink 4K. So this just kind of echoes what I've been saying for years now, is when you get this lower quality equipment, sometimes it works flawlessly. However, you could have 10 of them that are in the exact same case, and they might be the same, but most likely not. They might be different manufacturers sharing the same case just to save money. They might have completely different guts in it. They might have slightly different chipset revisions. They might have different motherboard revisions where one performs differently than the other. So I think that's part of the issue of Tink 4K input compatibility, is some of these lower quality things, which, I'm not at all insulting the Switch that you bought. I recommend that one, but we have to be honest with ourselves that a 4x2 HDMI matrix switch for $50 probably isn't made with the highest quality components, with a lot of research put into making sure they do it right. HDMI matrix switches should be hundreds of dollars. So, when you buy something that cheap, you should always expect it to either work or not, but that's why you always buy it from a place that you could return it just in case it doesn't. So I'll leave the eBay link and I'll paste it into an affiliate link, because why not, right? But if anybody wants to try it, definitely know that maybe it'll work with the Tink 4K's input, or maybe you'll get one of the versions with the lower quality chipsets that will have some issues or not work at all. Or maybe it'll work fine, but you'll get dropouts every 10 minutes or so, like I've seen with some of these before. So this is a tough one. I mean, it would be very easy for me to say, oh, just go buy one of these HD Furies for $600. But that's the extreme other end of it. I don't want to recommend a $600 anything for somebody unless it's really what you could use to do all of this stuff. I'd rather find a happy medium. I'd rather find a $200 switch that does everything. And, maybe you don't have the extreme control that you do with the HD Furies, but at least it'll just work. So I do appreciate the link. I will share that with anybody, but I will just politely warn everybody, buy at your own risk. Maybe it'll work exactly like Jason's, or maybe it'll work like some of the ones I've tested, or maybe it'll be completely different, and who knows. Next up, Oliver Clare is looking to finalize their setup and now have moved on to their HDMI stuff, and wanted to send a diagram to see if I thought setting up the full chain of stuff that way would work. Basically, they have a whole bunch of HDMI ins, and they're going to a RetroTink 4K, a 4K 120 TV, a Yamaha receiver, a capture card, and then a desktop monitors for a modern main PC setup. And they have 3 different switches or 3 different splitters and 2 switches in there. So this should technically work. And this wouldn't add any latency. So once your game is running and everything is all set up, there would be no more input latency. So the time from when you press a button to when there's movement on screen, there would be no more or less than if you had connected directly. However, every time an HDMI handshake occurs, it would have to go through like 5 different devices. So on your average TV, if you're switching between 1080p 24 and 1080p 60. So you're going from movies to games or whatever. Your TV will drop out, and then probably 4 or 5 seconds of black screen, and then you'll see like an OSD pop up, and then your screen will sync. If you add an HDMI splitter or switch into that mix, that might be 10 seconds because it has to handshake with the TV as well as whatever device you have in between. So every HDMI device you add in that chain could have to delay for another handshake. Maybe it'll all happen at the same time, but usually it doesn't. Usually there's a bunch of different detecting going on, and that could throw things off. So maybe you'll get lucky, and directly connected to your TV would be a 5-second dropout, and connected through all of them would be a 10-second dropout because they're all syncing at once. Or maybe it would be 30, 40 seconds from the time that a resolution is switched till the time your TV syncs. So what you might actually want to do is get one of those Extron matrix switches on eBay. I think they go up to 1080p, the affordable ones go up to 1080p 60, but you get a lot of HDMI ins and a lot of HDMI out. And I would only use that newer Farisa switch, the one that I just reviewed. I would only use that for 4K 120. So all of your 4K 120 consoles would go into that Farisa switch, into the 4K 120 input of your TV. And then also, I guess, if you need to, the second output could go maybe into a capture card linked into your desktop monitor or something. You're still kind of pushing it, though. An ideal situation would be to have like a 10x6 HDMI 4K 120 matrix switch, but if that even exists, it would be thousands of dollars. So I would try to think of minimizing the amount of devices that you possibly can, and that's going to be a tough one. You could look into that HD Fury switch, but you'd still need another one at that point. So I don't know. This is a tough one. I would kind of take a 10-foot view and see what ways you can simplify this setup, and if you need everything connected to the same switch. Like, would you ever be using your PS5 on your RetroTink 4K? Would you ever need to stream your PS5? So then maybe that would just be through the Farisa switch into your TV and receiver. But if you do, then I don't know, things are going to get a little complicated. So your setup sounds ridiculously awesome, but here's the problem of having a push button setup as opposed to a plug in when you need it setup. Plug in when you need it's annoying because you got to spend 5 to 15 minutes every time you want to do something running wires and plugging stuff in, but it'll almost always just work once you plug it in. Whereas setting up something like this is going to take forever to set up, but once it's there, it should just work until it doesn't. That is definitely something I want to warn you about, in that the more devices you chain together, you could have it work 9 times out of 10, and then once it just won't. So you'll have to kill the power to absolutely everything and try powering it all back up at the same time or something. And that's an issue I'm having now with audio sync. Sometimes audio video sync is perfect, and other times it's way off, and I can't determine what the problem is. So I've been going back to killing the power every night, hoping that I could just resync it. And next it's going to have to be factory defaults on everything, yada, yada. So yeah. And listen, I'll also be honest and blunt and say, when I say it'll work 9 times out of 10, I will guarantee you, I will bet you one of my monitors that the one time it doesn't work is when you have your friends over to come hang out and play on your new setup. The 9 times it'll work flawlessly is when you're completely by yourself with no one there. And as soon as you have a group of people, it's like, yeah, no problem. Let's just play this. And then nothing will work. I don't know why. It's always been that way. Always, at least for me. So it's a fair warning. But yeah, hopefully take a step back, see what you could simplify, and then let's see if we could refigure this stuff out. Next up, Mr. Morrow wants to know if that Farisa HDMI switch will work with Mr. Direct Video. I do not have it. I already shipped it off, and I completely forgot to test that. And now I feel like a total asshole. Not your fault, Mr. Morrow. My fault, 100%. Wow, I can't believe I forgot to test that. I'm really sorry. It's actually in the mail now, being shipped off to the person who was kind enough to buy it for me to test. I can't believe I just can't believe I forgot that one. Wow. Well, look, the one good news is it's an Amazon link. So if you buy it and it doesn't work with Mr., you could just return it, which I know it sucks. I'm asking you to do the testing I should have done in the first place. But, oh, yeah, I'm sorry about that. I screwed up big time. This is what I get for overscheduling myself, right? That switch came in and I'm like, all right, I have 50 things to do today and like 8 hours to do it in. So let me scramble. I wish there were more hours in the day. That's the other reason I skipped the MD Fourier testing, because I'm like, how many people are going to actually use the audio outputs of this switch? I'm not going to waste, hours of my life doing that for nobody because if nobody was going to use it anyway that way. So I screwed up. Sorry, Mr. Morrow, but hey, if you buy it, please let me know and I'll update the post. Next up, Demonku is looking for some information on converting composite video to RF or vice versa through a VCR. And yes, it will do all of that, and it will do it all at 0 added latency. I just did a video that talked about all of this. I definitely recommend watching it. And this is a fun and silly video that digs into things that maybe you would never need for your setup. But if you're supporting RetroRGB, you're probably a fellow nerd, and I imagine that you would enjoy that one. But it actually answers your questions with visual examples and proof of 0 latency and proof of it all working. So definitely check that one out. But I loved doing that video. The entire time I was doing it, I knew so many of the things I was doing was completely ridiculous, but I wanted to have that video information archived out there. I didn't care if it got 2 views on YouTube. I just knew that I was enjoying doing it, and I knew there would be questions like this that I could reference it just to say, yes, and I have a whole walkthrough on how to do it, even though there's probably only 10 of us in the world left that care. So Demonku, you're one of us. Check out that video. Next up, Bill Olson wants to know if I have any suggestions for a manual component video switch that supports 4 or more devices. They could only seem to find ones that support up to 3 devices. Yeah, same here. I was getting a lot of questions from people who were just getting into the hobby or just switching over to component, and they didn't want to spend tons of money on a brand new G-Comp or GamesCare switch, even though those are both amazing devices. Maybe you don't need auto switching, or maybe you don't know if this is a hobby you're going to stick with. So why drop hundreds when you just want to plug a bunch of stuff in? So I tried looking for cheap alternatives to that, and I couldn't find any other than the ones you're probably referring to, the little black boxes and stuff. And so you do have a couple of choices, but it's probably going to end up being used equipment. And that always poses a problem. Is the used equipment any good? How long is that going to last? If you spent the money on a nice Extron crosspoint and a bunch of BNC to RCA connectors and then a bunch of Phoenix connectors for audio, you might be able to get all of that for around $100. But how long is that crosspoint going to last? Good chance it's going to last a long time, but you don't know that. Used equipment is used equipment. So I don't know. I think I would just search around. If you're looking for manual push-button 1 output switches, there's really no safety issues. Maybe it could add some interference, but I can't remember a scenario in which a component, composite, or S-Video manual push-button switch ever posed any safety issue whatsoever. So if you find a manual switch with only 1 output, I would just, one that doesn't plug into power, just only video inputs, buy anything and give it a try. And if you think something's off, plug the component console directly into the display, try it out, and then plug it through the switch. And, if you see a massive difference, then the switch is the problem. But I think that's a pretty safe recommendation. So if you need more than 3, I would either just find any used manual, non-powered 1 output switch, or go the route of like an Extron crosspoint, or just drop the cash on a G-Comp or a GamesCare switch. But just as much as I love those, and I have nothing but good things to say about them, not everybody needs those. Next up, do I have any suggestions for an ultrasonic cleaner for cleaning console PCBs? No, but I think Tito links to the one that he uses in his videos. And if he doesn't, he really should, and add an affiliate link. Tito, if you're listening, okay, definitely do that. I've never actually used one myself, and it's something that I would love to have, but I'm basically out of space here. So I would love to put an addition on my house, including an extra garage bay that I could have all of these tools and stuff, but that's never going to happen. So I don't think I'm ever going to be able to buy one and then have a place to put it. So I'm definitely not the person to recommend that. But the one Tito was using looked like it was working perfect. So I would check his videos and, always check for the affiliate links when possible. I always do that when I'm buying stuff from my friends links as well, just because it costs a lot of money to do this stuff. I'm not getting off on a tangent here, but most people don't realize that people who create videos that actually put real time and effort into doing so, need a lot of equipment, and with every video comes more equipment and more cost. So when possible, definitely use people's affiliate links. I definitely do. Yeah, thank you very much for the kind words. I love doing this, and I wouldn't be able to if it wasn't for you all. So thanks, Bill. Hopefully I'm able to point you in the right direction. Green Devil wants to know if I have any recommendations on a VCR to use for converting family videos. So I'm going to spit out the answer, and then I'm probably going to word vomit afterwards. So the answer is right now, and my opinions are always evolving here, but right now I would say any 4-head VCR that has S-video output should be exactly what you're looking for. If you can't find one with S-video output, at least get one with 4-head, not one of the cheap 2-head ones. And get one in decent condition. You know, if it looks like it's been thrown down a flight of stairs, the components inside probably aren't very good. So that's my recommendation. Let me explain why. And if you don't care about this stuff, please skip on or drop off. I'm not sure if there's any questions after this. So, word vomit incoming. So all VCRs, all VHS tapes record Y and C, chroma and luma, separately. So even if you plug composite video into that VCR and you hit record, it is separating chroma and luma on that tape. So there's always potential for better quality signal on the output side. Now, VHS is 250 TVL. It is a really lossy format, big time, to the point where over-the-air broadcasts, if you lived close enough, were probably better than VCR back in the day. However, there comes a lot of stuff, a lot of baggage with that. And while I use a rainbow pattern to try to talk about 3-comb filters and to try to get rid of any of that extra color banding, I think dot crawl is the number one thing that you would actually see in home videos, where you get like jaggy lines going up the screen in different places depending on what's on screen. And if you're using something like a Laserdisc, which is encoded in composite video, you absolutely need a 3D comb filter to get through that and to make it look good. However, if you're going with a VCR, getting S-video out could reduce the amount of dot crawl, even if it was recorded in composite video. That's always going to be there, but at least on your output separation, there's less chance of it all mixing together in composite video. And also, once it's been encoded onto the tape, it's really hard to filter that stuff out anyway. So, it's going to be really hard to find devices with 3D comb filters in them. The RetroTink 4K has one. It's more like a 2.75D comb filter, but it's still very good. There's one Osprey capture card that has it. There's actually two, but one's almost completely end of life. So you're basically stuck with, for new equipment, the RetroTink 4K and a $550 capture card if you really want to filter this stuff out. So I would suggest that having a VCR with S-video would really reduce the amount of dot crawl within reason. A very lossy format. And how it was encoded matters, but I think that's the easiest way. Now, the problem there is whether you have, a really nice 6-head VCR. I actually don't know if that would make a difference, to be honest, 4-head versus 6-head, but let's just say you have a really nice Pro Edition VCR with composite out and a 3D comb filter. Probably would look the same as a really nice 4-head VCR with S-video output, but there's a lot more to it. Are the audio and video going to stay in sync? Is there time-based correction in your capture? The Tinks have it. Some of those cheap, crappy boxes from Amazon now offer that as a feature because of all the people complaining. Like, hey, I put in a 20-minute home video. Minute 1's fine, but minute 19, the voices are all over the place. You can't follow what's going on. But then the issue after that is compression. And actually, the next issue would be deinterlacing. How well is this 480i source material being deinterlaced? The Tinks do a fine job. There are other processors that do a little bit better of a job, and then you could record in 480i and do post-processing, but then that's going to have to match the content, and that stuff gets really time-consuming and confusing. It's even confusing. I've got 20 years into this, and I'm still learning new things all the time. Basically every time I talk to Fudo, I get a new lesson that I have to go back and deep dive research. And I'm buying all of these tools and all of these test discs to try to present all of this info to everybody in an easy way. But then lastly, what about compression? When does it matter and why does it matter? So those little boxes you get off Amazon use really low quality compression. And even if you record to 1080p, are they compressing on the input side or are they compressing on the 1080p side? So that's one of the things I'm demonstrating in the Tink VHS video, is that if you have 480i lossless that you then scale to 4K and then compress, so that means plugging it into the Tink and compressing on the 4K side, that will almost always look the same as if you had compressed it on the input side. So let's just say 480i going into a DVD recorder onto a DVD, that's MPEG compression, and then you scale that to 4K with a second compression, probably H.264. So how do those Amazon devices work? Are they compressing 480i and then scaling it? Are they scaling it to 1080p and compressing? They definitely don't have a 3D comb filter. And the 1080p output they stretched the image wide and there's no aspect control. So you still have to do post-processing. So your last question of VHS conversion guide when? I have a lot more work to do. And I thought I was halfway done, and I don't think I am. I have to buy a bunch more equipment. I have to run a bunch more tests. However, there is one thing I know for sure. The RetroTink 5X and 4K are not bad choices. In fact, all of my testing so far has shown that they're very, very good choices. To the point where if you had a lost anime where the only version left was one single version or two single VHS copies, yeah, I would go Doomsday in a full pro route and I would go nuts, and I would probably still use the Tink at the same time as a reference file, but I wouldn't use that as either of the Tinks as your main restoration for archived media like that. But if you're talking about, I have 20 home videos that I just want to get in decent quality up on YouTube or Facebook to share with my family, going through a Tink into whatever the target resolution is, 1080p or 4K, and doing it that way, I think that you will be more than happy. And I think if even a year from now you bought a Doomsday set just because you're crazy like me and you like this stuff and you wanted to do raw RF capture and you wanted to leave your computer running for a couple of days to process it to 480i, and then you wanted to leave your computer running for hours to process that to 4K and put that on YouTube, with VHS home movies, I don't know if you'll notice a difference. Maybe a little bit, but certainly not like a holy crap difference. So yeah, I warned you all word vomit was coming, but this was also kind of a where I'm at with this VHS stuff. I have right here 2 of those Amazon capture devices sitting next to me. I just bought 2 more things today to continue on to these tests. And I'm delaying the Tink video a little bit longer just so I could get one or two more comparisons right, because the comparisons that are in there are fine, but I have a problem with how easy it is to see what it is I'm referring to. So I'm delaying the Tink video probably 2 more weeks so I can get this other equipment in so I could show you some more stuff. And the VHS conversion guide, or basically it's going to be any magnetic tape media in Laserdisc. So any 480i content that's not already digital. I'll have to find a more catchy title for that video, because any content that is analog in 480i is not going to be a great thumbnail. But that's what the video is going to be about. And that is going to be super deep dive, comparing all of these different solutions, but also comparing it from the perspective of what is your goal. And one of the things I've been telling so many people is if you have a stack of 50 VHS tapes or whatever camcorder tapes that you have that your family wants you to digitize, it might actually be better for you to get a really nice DVD VHS combo unit, teach one of your family members, especially if they're retired, how to put them on DVD, and then you rip them and scale them. And you will notice MPEG compression from that DVD when you scale it. It will not be as good as a Tink, but you don't have to spend weeks of your life doing it. Does Amazon boxes? I don't know if I'm going to be able to recommend those. If at least the one I was testing squished or put a 1080p with a 4:3 in the middle, that one I might at least say okay, but now you still need post-processing, which defeats the purpose of a very easy device with a little screen built in. So I want to find an Amazon device for the same reason that you could just tell your relative, here's a VCR, press play, press record on this. When you're done, press stop and be done with it. But I just haven't found one yet. So ease of conversion is going to be a huge part of this video as well, just because if you have one or two things that are important to you, or even 20 things that are important to you, cool. But what if you're a tape transfer service? What if you do this for your family and all of your in-laws want you to do theirs and your aunts and uncles want you to do theirs? Easier might actually win for a lot of people in this scenario. So yeah, that was a very long answer, but hopefully Green Devil, I pointed you in the right direction and got you like a basic overview. Next, Dark Roast Chris wants to know if I know when the add-on or expansion boards are going to be released for the OSSC Pro. The newsletter said early April, and it's late April now. That downscaling video has made them really want to try that out. No, I have no clue, but I should follow up with Marcus soon. I hope more pros are going to be available. I don't know if it seemed like there was a smaller run again this time, and I haven't heard anything about those, but I hope they're out soon, because as more videos are being released to show off the Pro, more people are going to start to realize how it might be the perfect device for their setup. Or they might realize the Tank 4K is the perfect device for their setup, but they could deal with spending half the money and getting half the resolution. No disrespect to Mike, of course, or Marcus. I mean, it is what it is. I love them both. I highly recommend them both, but I guarantee there would be, there's going to be the right choice for the right setup. So yeah, I don't know. I hope to hear more info on all that stuff soon. And, I hope to hear more about the OSSC Pro soon. I was really excited to see Marco's video, and it's a great video too. So I want to see more stuff like that, but I'll let you know whenever I hear anything, and I'll post on RetroRGB, of course. Well, that's it for this week. If you have any questions, just ask wherever it is you support in the latest Q&A post. This week, and often it's only on Patreon, but that's only because that's where the majority of the supporters are. Anybody who supports on any of the services can feel free to participate in these. And if you don't support in the services, hit me up wherever else that is that you could find me, and I'll try my best to answer, but there's only enough hours in the day. So as always, thanks to everybody who participates in these, and especially thanks to everybody who supports in absolutely any way, because it's you who's keeping all this stuff alive. So thank you all very much, and I'll see you next week.